What's going on, guys? Back at it again with another Isobel build here for you guys on the channel. This one I am calling the Enforcer. It is, as you see right in front of you, a dual wield build. One that I thoroughly enjoyed. Really, I enjoy any dual wield build on the channel. However, this one was probably one of the better ones in my opinion, mainly because Isobel's companion passive or racial passive that makes her skills be activated that much faster. This build was a ton of fun, guys. If you're excited for this one, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, let's jump right into this. Alright guys, so I'm going to start off with the Breton skills in terms of her passives because it does affect directly some of the damage output available for Isobel in this current setup. So because of that, I want to start off with the passives. It's called Enchanted. Enchanted decreases ability cooldown by 3% and damage taken by 3%. So this does two things for you that's actually directly involved with this specific build. Because she's an up close and personal type of build, the second half of this really becomes that much more important, which decreases damage taken by 3%, allowing her to stay alive just that much longer. But the first part of this is really where this helps substantially in this build, and that is the fact that it decreases ability cooldown by 3%, allowing her to keep her skills up for that much more. So because the cooldown of her skills is reduced, she is literally able to use her skills much more often, and in turn increases the overall DPS output of this current build. Great passive for this specific build, guys. Highly recommend this build for you guys if you guys are interested in this. In terms of skills, in the number 1 slot, she has Razor Cape. This adds to the survivability of Isobel. Razor Cape reads as Isobel Valois envelops themselves in a ring of floating razors, dealing 1,809 physical damage to nearby enemies every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. The razors also shield them from attacks, reducing their damage taken by 20%. So right off the bat, I know it's very easy to look at that first half and say, wow, yeah, it even adds DPS. It's really not a substantial amount, but it does help, right? The damage output from this is just okay, in my opinion. Where you really get your bang for your buck on this specific skill is on the second half of this skill, which gives you essentially damage reduction by 20% for the duration of the skill, which is 8 seconds. With the cooldown at 11.6 seconds, this ends up being a pretty good skill all the way around. Not just for damage output, but fundamentally for damage reduction, adding to the survivability of your companion. In the number 2 slot, I don't think you are a Templar without putting in a form of jabs. So this one was a mandatory slot for me, only because, again, jabs or sweeps, or in this case, penetrating strikes, is a staple for the Templar class, so I just had to slot this. But that's not to say anything about the skill, because the skill itself is fantastic. Penetrating strikes reads as Isobel Valois attacks 4 times with a magic spear, dealing 2,260 magic damage to all enemies in front of them with each strike. After their assault, Isobel Valois grants themselves and nearby allies a boon that increases the damage of their next light or heavy attack by 50%. So not only does it do a pretty healthy amount of damage by doing 2,260 magic damage to enemies 4 times in a row, on top of that, to everybody in front of them, but on top of that, it also gives you the ability to increase the next light or heavy attack of her and of everybody in the team, including you, by 50%. So this, again, is just a great buff, not just for her, but for you as well, on top of the very healthy amount of damage that it does. It does have one downside though, the fact that it has a slightly higher than average cooldown rate at 15.5 seconds, but I think that more than makes up for it with the second half of this skill, which increases the next light or heavy attack by 50% for everybody in the group, including her and including you. Fantastic skill all the way around, guys. Highly recommend this skill to be slotted, mainly because it's a Templar skill, but the fact that it's usable as well. In the number 3 slot, we have Sunbrand. Isobel Veloil hurls a blazing ball of fire at an enemy, dealing 9,043 flame damage on impact and an additional 6,776 flame damage over 8 seconds. With the cooldown of 11.6 seconds, this skill ends up being fantastic all the way around in the both initial hit and in the damage over time capabilities of this skill. Right off the bat, this skill gives you, or gives her, an initial 9,043 flame damage on the first hit and an additional 6,776 flame damage over 8 seconds. I really like these kinds of skills, guys, because it does two things. It gives you an initial burst damage of 9,043, but it also gives you a damage over time, which is always fantastic in the DPS department because it just increases your overall DPS all the way around. Fantastic skill, guys. With the cooldown of 11.6 seconds, also a pretty average number. I think this is a great skill to have slotted all the way around. In the number 4 slot, one of my favorite skills in the weapons tool set is Swift Assault. Swift Assault reads as Isobel Veloil floods an enemy with steel, battering them with 5 consecutive attacks that deal 1,809 physical damage. This skill doesn't look like a lot at first glance because you see the number at 1,809 physical damage and you're like, what? Really? But you have to keep in mind that this is 5 times that number. And it really just ends up being a pretty healthy amount of damage all the way around. And even if you take into consideration the cooldown rate, which is 7.8 seconds, the fact that she will be using this skill very often really adds to the DPS output of this specific skill because she'll be able to use it very consistently and very often. So because of that, this is a must, in my opinion, slottable for your companion if you're running dual wield. Fantastic skill, guys. Highly recommend. And in the last slot, we have our heal, which is Blessed Sacrament. Blessed Sacrament reads as Isobel Veloil sends out a burst of soothing light, healing themselves or a nearby ally for 3,795 health and an additional 1,423 every 2 seconds for 8 seconds as the light momentarily lingers. Used when Isobel or an ally is below 75% health. So right off the bat, as I said with Sunbrand earlier, I like these types of skills because it does two things. This one is slightly different, obviously, than Sunbrand. Sunbrand is a DPS dealing ability, whereas this is a heal. And because of that, it gives you an initial burst heal of 3,795 health, but also additionally, it also adds a heal over time, which is 1,423 every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. So it's going to be 4 ticks of 1,423, really helping out Isobel in her survivability in terms of heals. The fact that the cooldown is also 7.8 seconds really allows Isobel to be able to use her heal whenever is needed because of the very low cooldown rate of this specific skill. This one is great in my opinion, guys. This is really, she has a great skills when it comes to heals, so it's really hard to pick one over others in certain occasions. This one, of course, was my preferred because the healing potency is a little bit more, but if you want to sacrifice a little bit of healing for a little bit of health, a little bit of healing for a little bit of damage, I recommend you throw in Beam of Reproach because it also deals that instant 4,521 magic damage initially, also giving you a smaller burst heal and a smaller heal over time. But again, even though the heals are slightly smaller than Blessed Sacrament, it also gives you the advantage of dealing magic damage right off the bat. So it ends up being really good. The other downfall is that this Blessed Sacrament is 7.8 seconds, whereas Beam of Reproach is at 11.6 seconds. So the availability of the skill is slightly less. However, it's not really that bad, seeing as it's just an average cooldown rate. So you can't go wrong with Beam of Reproach or Blessed Sacrament, in my opinion, or even in whatever in this case would be good to have Holy Ground as well. Either one of these skills would work for this specific build. Just keep in mind that Holy Ground does have a 15.5 seconds, which is its major downfall in my opinion. However, any of these heals would be great for this specific build. I just ended up going with Blessed Sacrament versus the other two, but like I said, you can't go wrong with either of the three. In terms of your ultimate, you have Baneslayer. Baneslayer reads as Isobel Velois channels their energy and conjures a weapon made of sunlight before striking downward, dealing 9,043 magic damage to all enemies in front of them. Enemies damaged by Baneslayer have particles remaining on them for 10 seconds that detonate for 4,521 magic damage when a player deals damage to them. This, right off the bat, is a good ultimate. It's very powerful in my opinion, even though it deals 9,043 magic damage. Where you get your bread and butter off of this is the second half of the ultimate, which gives you an additional 4,521 magic damage for 10 seconds every time you hit the enemy. So as long as the enemy was hit by Baneslayer initially to begin with. So it ends up being one of those DPS boosting ultimates, which ends up being pretty fantastic to say the least. Let's check out her gear. In terms of gear, I like to equip my companions in the same fashion that I use for my own personal builds. So what I mean by that is simple. When I build my own characters, I go by 2 5-piece sets and a 2-piece monster sets. Since monster sets aren't really a thing for companions, I usually just slot a 2-piece and call it a day. So for the first 2-piece set, we are going with medium aggressive. Medium specifically because in the armor skill line, the medium, if you read on the first line, it says increases damage done by 1% for each piece of medium armor equipped. So for each piece of medium that you have, that's an additional 1% of added damage to your overall damage output. So it really does increase your damage output by just simply slotting in some medium gear. On top of that, we have the aggressive trait for both the shoulder and the headpiece, which increases damage done by an additional 1.7% per piece slotted, which this is a 2-piece, so that's just that much more. This added with the medium set really does increase the overall DPS, and because of that, the first 5-piece set is also medium aggressive. Again, because we have 7 pieces on the body slotted, you get the full advantage of the medium armor passive, which increases your damage output by 7 additional percent. On top of that, your aggressive skill also increases damage done by 1.7% for each piece slotted. So that's 1.7 times 7, whatever that ends up being is your number, which is fantastic to say the least. This is high damage output just by having these pieces slotted. For your 5-piece set, we are going with Shattering. Shattering increases penetration by 1,300, and that's going to go for all 3 of your jewelry pieces, including your weapons, which I know it says daggers here. It doesn't matter whether you go with a mace, daggers, or swords, because companions don't take advantage of having, penetration or anything like that. That's all 100% based off of your trait for companions. So it really doesn't matter if you have daggers, swords, maces, etc., because it really all acts as the same. So I do have 2 daggers here, even though I have the transmog of maces. I think it just looks better for a Templar in my opinion, but we'll get to the fashion in a second. But of course, Shattering increases penetration, which of course if you can bypass some of the armor that the enemy has, it allows you to deal just that much more damage all the way around, making this a pretty good set to have in conjunction with your aggressive traits. With that being said, let's go over to the house and check out her fashion. Alright guys, in terms of fashion, I do have her set up with a crown shop item, which you might have seen from some of the trailers because it is the Breton hero armor. This is such a gorgeous outfit in my opinion, so of course I had to throw it on her. In terms of dyes, I do have Cold Harbor Ash Black, blood gold and windhelm steel. I think this looks fantastic. For the actual weapons itself, I have Breton Mace 4 on both of them in terms of dyes: Cyrodiilic Steel, Templar's Last Dawn, and Wolf's Fur Brown. Let me know down in the comments section what you guys think of her fashion. And with that being said, let's go see if we can solo a world boss. And there you have it, guys. The Enforcer build has officially been completed here on the channel. As you guys saw when we went to fight a world boss, she had no issues sustaining not just damage, but also her heals. I know it's kind of tough to see that second part of it because I mainly just taunt, just so that you guys can see the damage output of said companions. But trust me when I'm telling you this, she is fantastic when it comes to survivability. Not just that, but also fantastic when it comes to damage dealing, as you guys saw firsthand. This build was a ton of fun, as I've said before, and I'm glad that I got to experience it. If you guys are planning to use this build, let me know down in the comment section because I'm legitimately curious how many people actually use my builds. And on top of that, if you enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.